For a fleeting moment, Olive Thomas was Hollywood's darling, a luminous star who captivated audiences with her charm and beauty. But beneath the glitz of her silver screen persona lay a turbulent life marked by struggles, heartbreak, and choices that would lead her down a dark and tragic path. Her rise from humble beginnings to scandalous stardom felt like a dream, but her untimely death shattered the illusion, marking the end of old Hollywood's innocence. Born Olive Thomas in 1894 in the industrial steel town of Charleroi, Pennsylvania, Olive's early years were far removed from the glamorous world she would one day inhabit. Her childhood was quiet and uneventful until tragedy struck in 1906. At just 12 years old, Olive experienced a devastating loss that would alter the course of her life forever. Her father, James Duffy, a hard-working steelworker, died in a horrific workplace accident. Suddenly fatherless, Olive and her siblings were thrust into financial hardship. Struggling to keep her family afloat, Olive's mother, Rena, made the difficult decision to move the family to McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, a bustling factory town. Life there was anything but easy. Rena worked grueling hours in a factory, leaving Olive and her siblings in the care of their grandparents. Despite the family's best efforts, money was scarce, and Olive soon found herself making sacrifices of her own to contribute to their survival. At just 15 years old, Olive dropped out of high school to take on full-time work. Her early jobs were far from glamorous, selling fabric in department stores and earning meager wages. Yet unknowingly, these unremarkable roles were steering her toward destiny. Even amid her struggles, Olive stood out in a crowd, her beauty impossible to ignore. Described by those who knew her as legendary, Olive possessed an ethereal quality that drew attention wherever she went. Her striking violet blue eyes, framed by impossibly long dark lashes, and her pale, flawless complexion were unforgettable. It was a beauty that seemed almost otherworldly, yet it came with a price. While her looks opened doors, they also attracted the wrong kind of attention from men who saw her as little more than a pretty face. At just 15 years old, Olive left school behind and found herself drawn to Bernard Krug Thomas, a young man from her hometown of McKees Rocks. Perhaps she saw in him a chance to escape the monotony and hardship of her life. They were both inexperienced, headstrong, and eager to take on the world together. So, in 1911, at the tender age of 16, Olive married Bernard. But what seemed like a romantic leap of faith quickly proved to be a disastrous misstep. As newlyweds, Olive and Bernard's inexperience was glaring. With no real plans or resources, they started their married life under the roof of Bernard's parents. Eventually, they managed to get their own place, and for a brief period, Olive played the role of a content housewife. Bernard worked for an automobile company while Olive stayed home to manage their tiny apartment. But it didn't take long for the cracks in their marriage to show. The restless, ambitious spirit that defined Olive wasn't built for domesticity, and the life of a housewife began to suffocate her. By 1913, Olive had made up her mind. She left Bernard behind, packing her dreams and heading to New York City. The bold decision to abandon her husband wasn't just an act of rebellion. It was her first step toward reinventing herself. She dove into the world of modeling, determined to carve out a new path, but Bernard wasn't about to let her go without a fight. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 2 bitter years, finally concluding in 1915. By then, any affection the couple had once shared had curdled into animosity. Bernard accused Olive of desertion and cruelty, claiming she was more interested in luxury and climbing the social ladder than saving their marriage. His harsh words cut deep, but they also carried a grain of truth. Olive was, in fact, driven by a desire to improve her circumstances, to reach beyond the confines of her small-town life, and she was about to do just that. When Olive Thomas arrived in New York City in 1914, she wasn't just another young dreamer hoping to make it big. She was a force of nature. With her striking beauty and unshakable confidence, Olive didn't just blend into the city's vibrant crowd. She stood out, and it didn't take long for New York to take notice. Shortly after moving to the Big Apple, Olive entered and won the Most Beautiful Girl in New York contest, an achievement that skyrocketed her into the public eye. But Olive wasn't content with fleeting fame. She began working as an artist model for celebrated illustrators like Raphael Kirchner and Penryn Stanlaws, whose works graced everything from magazines to postcards. Olive, often posing in the nude, embodied a daring confidence that pushed societal boundaries, making her both scandalous and unforgettable. In less than a year, Olive's career took a monumental leap forward when she earned a spot in the legendary Ziegfeld Follies. These theatrical revues, masterminded by the influential producer Florenz Ziegfeld, were the pinnacle of glamour, known for their elaborate productions and dazzling lineups of showgirls. For Olive, it was everything she had ever dreamed of: a stage, an audience, and the chance to shine in the spotlight. Getting into the Follies wasn't easy, but Olive had a knack for getting what she wanted. While some accounts suggest she earned her place through a letter of recommendation from one of the artists she modeled for, Olive herself told a far more audacious tale. According to her, she walked straight up to Ziegfeld and asked for the job. Whether it was charm, confidence, or sheer audacity, Olive landed her role, and it wasn't long before she became one of the Follies' brightest stars. Her popularity soared, and soon Ziegfeld brought her into an even more exclusive production, The Midnight Frolic. Performed on the rooftop of the New Amsterdam Theater, The Frolic was a risque after-hours show that catered to New York's elite. It featured the most beautiful Ziegfeld girls in revealing costumes, creating an atmosphere of indulgence and intrigue. Olive's participation in this bold and boundary-pushing show transformed her from a rising starlet into a sensation. Olive Thomas's rise to fame came with a price, a world of scandal, intrigue, and secrets that still fascinates to this day. Her time in the Midnight Frolic wasn't just a career-defining chapter, it became the stuff of legend. Olive's performances were nothing short of provocative, earning her infamy for her daring costumes, or lack thereof. One particularly infamous act involved her wearing nothing but strategically placed balloons, which wealthy patrons would attempt to pop with their cigars. It was a spectacle that titillated New York's elite and cemented Olive's reputation as the ultimate bad girl of the Ziegfeld lineup. The Midnight Frolic attracted a clientele of the world's wealthiest and most powerful men, many of whom became entranced by Olive. And among her admirers was one particularly notable figure, Albrecht von Bernstorff. The German ambassador to the United States was one of Olive's regulars. Known as an intellectual and later remembered for his role in resisting the Third Reich, Bernstorff's attentions were focused on Olive during these wild nights. Rumors swirled about their relationship, particularly after whispers emerged that he had gifted her an extravagant string of pearls worth $10,000, a jaw-dropping sum in those days. Such gifts weren't just symbols of affection. They were proof of the luxury Olive was quickly becoming accustomed to. But living life on the edge often invites trouble, and Olive's lifestyle was no exception. Among her many entanglements, one of the most scandalous was her affair with Florenz Ziegfeld himself, the man behind the Follies. Ziegfeld wasn't just her boss. He was a married man, wed to Billie Burke, the radiant actress who would later become famous for playing Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz. Yet Olive seemed unfazed by the moral implications of their relationship. Whether out of ambition or genuine affection, she pursued the affair with reckless abandon, unbothered by the potential fallout. But Olive wasn't content to remain Ziegfeld's mistress. The more time she spent with him, the more determined she became to turn their clandestine relationship into something official. Despite knowing Ziegfeld had a history of flings with his chorus girls, Olive pressured him to leave his wife and marry her instead. She wanted the ring, the legitimacy, and the power that came with being Mrs. Ziegfeld. However, Olive was about to receive a harsh reality check. Florenz Ziegfeld was a man of immense influence, but he was also deeply tied to his public image, and divorcing Billie Burke, Hollywood royalty in her own right, wasn't part of his plan. For Olive, who had built her life on bold moves and high stakes, this rejection was both humbling and infuriating. When her affair with Florenz Ziegfeld came to a crashing halt, it was the first time she didn't get her way. Ziegfeld had no intention of leaving his wife, Billie Burke, for Olive, not even for all her charm and beauty. Why would he? He'd been enjoying the best of both worlds for years, but Olive wasn't one to cling to rejection. With her signature self-respect and flair for the dramatic, she walked out of Ziegfeld's life with her head held high. Shortly after parting ways with Ziegfeld, Olive became the first ever Vargas girl, posing for the renowned Peruvian artist Alberto Vargas. His signature pinup style would later dominate the art world, and Olive was his groundbreaking muse. In his iconic portrait, Memories of Olive, she's depicted bare from the waist up, sensually inhaling the fragrance of a flower. The painting captured her beauty and allure so perfectly that it became an instant sensation. But when Ziegfeld saw the portrait, his reaction was peculiar, to say the least. Although Vargas himself denied rumors that Ziegfeld had commissioned the provocative painting, what Ziegfeld did next added fuel to the gossip fire. He purchased the artwork outright and hung it in his office at the New Amsterdam Theater. Imagine this, a larger-than-life portrait of Olive, exposed and breathtaking, staring down at him while he worked. Was it regret? Obsession? Whatever the reason, it was clear that Olive had left a mark he couldn't erase. But while Ziegfeld was busy staring at her likeness, Olive had already moved on. From the moment Olive Thomas and Jack Pickford met, their romance seemed destined to make headlines. Jack wasn't just another Hollywood heartthrob. As the brother of Mary Pickford, one of the most celebrated actresses of the silent film era, he carried the kind of prestige and connections that made Olive's ambitions feel even more within reach. Their connection was instant and electric, and in true Olive fashion, she dove headfirst into the relationship. By October 1916, just weeks after meeting, the couple eloped in a whirlwind ceremony that was as impulsive as it was romantic. But their decision to marry wasn't just bold, it was shrouded in secrecy. Determined to avoid speculation that she was using the Pickford name to further her career, Olive insisted on keeping the union under wraps. Even their families were left in the dark. The wedding was a simple affair, with only actor Thomas Meehan present as a witness. While the newlyweds might have seen their clandestine ceremony as a symbol of their fiery love, the secrecy hinted at deeper tensions, particularly with Jack's family. Mary Pickford, Jack's famous sister, had always harbored reservations about the match. While she admitted to having a soft spot for Olive, Mary saw their relationship as reckless and immature, describing them as a couple of children playing together. Her concerns weren't entirely unfounded. Behind their glamorous facade, Jack and Olive's marriage was a tempestuous mix of passion, excess, and chaos. Their union quickly became the talk of Hollywood, not only for their undeniable chemistry, but also for their shared love of wild, extravagant living. The couple earned a reputation for throwing raucous parties, with champagne flowing freely and whispered rumors of drug use swirling around them. Their escapades pushed the boundaries of what even Hollywood considered scandalous, cementing their status as the industry's most infamous couple. Some dismissed the tales of their bacchanalian soirees as exaggerated gossip, but others claimed to have witnessed the debauchery firsthand. As Olive's career began to take off, she decided to leave her Broadway days behind, a move that infuriated her former boss, Florenz Ziegfeld. According to Mary Pickford, Ziegfeld never forgave Jack for stealing Olive from his beloved Follies, but Olive had bigger dreams. With Jack's encouragement, she transitioned to film, signing with the International Film Company. Her debut in Beatrice Fairfax marked the beginning of her rise in Hollywood. The following year, she starred in A Girl Like That and joined Triangle Pictures, solidifying her place as one of the industry's brightest new stars. However, fame came with its own set of challenges. As Olive's star ascended, the media turned its attention to her personal life, digging into her past and uncovering secrets she and Jack had worked hard to keep hidden. The scrutiny was relentless, turning their relationship into public fodder. Beneath the glittering surface, Jack and Olive's marriage was a volatile whirlwind of heated arguments, dramatic reconciliations, and endless cycles of makeups and breakups. Sometime between 1916 and 1920, Jack contracted syphilis, a consequence of one of his many extramarital affairs. The diagnosis added strain to an already volatile marriage, especially as their demanding careers often kept them apart for long periods. By 1920, their relationship was teetering on the brink of collapse. Desperate to salvage what was left, Olive and Jack devised a plan. A second honeymoon in Paris, a chance to rekindle their love and rebuild their crumbling foundation. The idea of Paris held a romantic allure, but their trip quickly turned into a continuation of old habits. Staying at the luxurious Ritz Hotel, the couple fell back into their routine of late-night revelry, frequenting the bohemian haunts of Montparnasse, where the champagne flowed freely and the parties stretched into the early hours. Their attempts to save their marriage were undermined by the same excesses that had defined their life together. The final chapter of Olive Thomas's life plays out like a tragic scene from a dark Hollywood drama, shrouded in mystery and devastating irony. The events of that fateful night on September 6, 1920, remain a haunting reminder of how quickly a life filled with glamour and promise can unravel. It was 3 a.m. when Olive and Jack Pickford stumbled into their Paris hotel, after another night of revelry in the city that never seemed to sleep. Exhausted and intoxicated, Jack went straight to bed. But Olive, restless and perhaps still caught up in the night's excitement, stayed awake a little longer, a decision that would prove fatal. In the early hours, Jack was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream coming from the bathroom. Disoriented and still groggy from the night's drinking, he rushed to find Olive in a state of panic. Her voice trembled as she cried out, "Oh my God!" Clutching a bottle, she begged Jack to figure out what she had just swallowed. When he picked it up and read the label, his heart sank. The word poison stared back at him in stark, unforgiving letters. In that horrifying moment, the reality of the situation began to sink in. As the pieces fell into place, the cruel irony of Olive's tragic mistake became apparent. While wandering the hotel room, she had gone to the bathroom in search of water or a sleeping tonic to soothe her nerves. Instead, she had grabbed a bottle containing mercury bichloride, a potent poison. The solution was meant for external use, part of Jack's treatment for the syphilis sores he had been battling in secret. Unaware of its deadly contents, Olive had taken a drink, sealing her fate in an instant. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jack sprang into action, rushing Olive to the American hospital in Neuilly-sur-Seine, a suburb of Paris. There she clung to life for nearly a week, fighting against the excruciating effects of mercury poisoning as it ravaged her body. Jack, consumed with guilt and desperation, stayed by her side, praying for a miracle. Yet even as Olive's life hung in the balance, the world outside the hospital walls was already ablaze with speculation and scandal. The death of Olive Thomas became a media firestorm, a tale that enthralled and scandalized the public in equal measure. In the days following her tragic poisoning, every newspaper across America and even beyond latched onto the story, filling their columns with speculation, theories, and intrigue. The circumstances of her demise were ripe for sensationalism, and the press didn't hold back. Theories ranged from heartbreaking to sinister, each one adding to the mystique of Olive's final days. Some outlets suggested that Olive's death was a desperate act, brought on by the discovery of yet another one, of Jack Pickford's infidelities. Others claimed it was because Pickford had given her syphilis, a disease as shameful as it was devastating at the time. But even darker possibilities began to circulate. One theory whispered among the public was that Olive hadn't harmed herself at all. Jack Pickford had done it for her. According to these chilling accusations, Jack had tricked Olive into drinking the mercury bichloride, lured by the prospect of cashing in on her insurance policy. This explosive rumor turned an already scandalous tragedy into a full-blown media circus. With the public now questioning his innocence, Jack found himself under intense scrutiny. While Olive lay in her hospital bed, growing weaker by the day, the world's eyes were fixed firmly on him. Jack vehemently denied every accusation, painting a picture of a marriage rooted in deep love and friendship. Olive and I were the greatest pals on earth, he insisted, pushing back against the dark narrative surrounding him. Yet even his heartfelt declarations couldn't quiet the storm of speculation. Jack Pickford wasn't just a grieving husband. He was a man on trial in the court of public opinion. While the headlines focused on the tragedy and controversy, Olive's fans remained devoted to her, mourning the loss of a woman who had captivated their hearts. She wasn't just admired, she was adored. Alberto Vargas, the artist who immortalized her as the first Vargas girl, famously called her one of the most beautiful brunettes that Ziegfeld ever glorified. To Vargas, Olive wasn't just a muse, she was an icon. He kept a copy of her portrait in his personal collection, a testament to the profound impact she had on those who knew her and those who simply admired her from afar. Olive Thomas's final days were a heartbreaking battle against impossible odds. After ingesting the deadly mercury bichloride, the glamorous starlet found herself fighting not just for her life, but for a future she couldn't yet believe was slipping away. At the beginning, there was hope. The doctors at the American hospital in Paris clung to the slim chance that she might pull through. Olive herself remained conscious and alert for much of her stay, even calling out for her husband, Jack Pickford, whenever he stepped away. Jack, consumed by guilt and fear, stayed at her bedside as much as he could, desperate to give her comfort. But even as Olive fought with all her might, the medics quietly feared the worst. As the hours turned into days, Olive's condition began to deteriorate. The mercury poisoning ravaged her body from the inside out, mercilessly attacking her internal organs. The breaking point came when her kidneys failed, leaving the doctors helpless to reverse the damage. Despite her composure and determination, Olive's body was losing the fight, and the once vibrant actress began to fade before their eyes. Yet, even in the face of death, Olive clung to hope. In what would be some of her final moments, she was still planning for a future she would never see. She spoke to her nurse about returning to America together and dreamed aloud of recovering at home with her mother. Jack, heartbroken but determined to keep her spirits up, put on a brave face and smiled through his despair. He tried to give her the strength to hold on, even as the reality of her condition became undeniable. The end came slowly and cruelly. During her last 12 hours, Olive survived only with the aid of hypodermic injections. Her frailty was evident, but her spirit refused to acknowledge the gravity of her situation. Watching her from her bedside, Jack later recounted the exact moment he realized she was slipping away. When he asked how she was feeling, her response was as devastating as it was courageous. "Pretty weak, but I'll be all right in a little while. Don't worry, darling." Jack had held Olive in his arms during her final moments, and the weight of her passing was more than he could bear. When he boarded the ship to bring her body back to America, his grief consumed him. Desperate and guilt-ridden, he climbed onto the ship's deck with the intent to throw himself overboard. It was only a fleeting moment of clarity, spurred by his sister Mary's memory, that stopped him. He later recalled a voice inside urging him, "You can't do this to your mother and sisters. It would be a cowardly act. You must live and face the future." With that, Jack stepped back from the edge, forced to endure a future haunted by the loss of the woman he loved. The sorrow that followed Olive's death was matched only by the chaos of her funeral. On September 29, 1920, mourners gathered at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in New York City to say their final goodbyes to one of Hollywood's brightest stars. As one of the first major tragedies in old Hollywood, Olive's death drew an immense crowd, turning the ceremony into an almost surreal spectacle. Police officers were needed to control the masses as fans swarmed the church, desperate for a final glimpse of their beloved icon. Several women fainted in the chaos, while others fought their way to the front of the service in a bid to pay their respects. The scene, chaotic as it was, underscored the profound impact Olive had on those who admired her. Amid the pandemonium, there was one particularly poignant moment. Despite their reservations about Olive during her lifetime, the Pickford family attended the funeral to honor her memory and support a grieving Jack. Their presence was a quiet but significant gesture, a recognition of the pain Jack carried, and an acknowledgement of Olive's tragic passing. Yet the tenderness they showed that day stood in stark contrast to the judgment Olive had endured from them while she was alive. It was a forgiveness that came too late to make a difference. Jack Pickford, who had been vilified in the press and by public speculation, was cleared of any wrongdoing. The medical examiner ruled Olive's death as accidental, caused by acute nephritis brought on by mercury poisoning. While the ruling cleared his name in the courtroom, it did little to sway the relentless court of public opinion. The whispers and accusations surrounding Jack would follow him for the rest of his life, leaving a shadow over his already shattered spirit. Jack and Olive's love story had always been a tempestuous mix of passion and chaos, but there was no denying the depth of their connection. Despite their volatile relationship, they were each other's great love. For Jack, the loss of Olive marked a turning point from which he would never recover. Though he remarried twice, one of his wives being another Ziegfeld girl, none of these relationships filled the void Olive had left. Grief consumed him, driving him deeper into a life of substance abuse. In a poignant twist of fate, Jack passed away in 1933 at the age of 36 in the very same Paris hospital where Olive had died 13 years earlier, cementing their tragic bond in the annals of Hollywood history. Though Olive's name has largely faded from modern memory, her legacy still lingers, perhaps more literally than one might expect. Legend has it that Olive's ghost haunts the New Amsterdam Theater in New York City, where she once dazzled audiences as a Ziegfeld girl. Theater staff and visitors have reported sightings of a shimmering figure, often described as holding a blue bottle, reminiscent of her final fateful night. Whether these stories are mere folklore or evidence of Olive's restless spirit, they add a mystical layer to her enduring legend. Olive Thomas's life was a whirlwind of beauty, fame, and heartbreak, a story that remains as captivating today as it was a century ago. Her mysterious death and the legacy of her talent continue to inspire intrigue and reflection on the fragility of life in the spotlight. Thank you for joining us as we explored her unforgettable story. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of Hollywood's most fascinating figures. Until next time, take care and stay curious.